Good afternoon. I'm very happy that I can present some of my experiences in space. The cooking experience, let me state that right from the beginning, is not matching what we have seen here. But we have to make do with what we have in space. And if you read my CV as attentive as our dear moderator, you will have noticed there is not mentioning of cooking as my hobby. But you will have also noted that I did a course in medical sciences, preparing me for the space flight. So I want to share the time here to run you through a couple of things that the human body has to undergo while in weightlessness, before I then come to, after clarifying what the environment is, so that we can look at how we cook and how we eat and how we make ourselves comfortable food-wise in space. This is a relation that you have to understand in order to see which dishes, later on we will see a couple of dishes, are there to please the astronauts. Can I have the slides? Yes, thank you. So I have called it a first-hand account of Made for Space, the effects of space on the human body. And there's a whole lot of things happening in the moment you get into space which change your body. Some of them you notice, some of them are only accessible and measurable if you undergo in-depth medical examinations. So if you beam yourself up into a space station surrounding in 90 minutes, once circling the globe, in 400 kilometers vertical distance, so not on once through the Netherlands, but rather the vertical distance in this respect, then you will have a couple of things that probably worry you during the day. You will have no natural day and night cycle. Contrary to the belief, the windows are not occupied all the time and we don't look down on Earth. And if we would do that, we would see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets in a day. So if you keep correcting your wristwatch according to this, it doesn't make sense. So you lose the time for breakfast, you lose the time for lunch, you lose the time for dinner. It's all artificial. It's on your daily plan that now it's dinner time, but you don't feel it. Not because of having spent a day in the normal light cycle. You will be hit by harsh radiation more than we are hit here down on Earth because of the atmosphere. We are shielded. And this has also an effect on organic material. You can imagine that radiation changes some of the very sensitive vitamins, for example. Vitamin C is degraded to a large amount when hit by solar radiation. So you keep your vitamin C really in a kind of bank safe in order to keep it from radiation. You have loud background noise. When you start eating in a restaurant, you want to have a very quiet, comfortable noise level. But here we have fans, we have ventilators, we have machines that are running. You can't understand what your colleague is saying on a certain distance. You have to use head-canceling noise phones. No, they are noise-canceling headphones, actually, in order to not risk a damage of your ear. You will be isolated from family and friends. There will be no such thing as common cooking or enjoying a good wine or something. You have to for half a year almost, you have to say goodbye to the physical presence of your family and friends. You have your crewmates, yes, but you mostly cannot select them. And the only connection that you have with Earth is through communication means, a television session, or some acoustic telephone calls or something like that. You will have an enclosed atmosphere. So the first moment you come into a space station, you will still smell the typical smell of, no, it's not a gym or something. It's more like a technical smell. It's something like burnt rubber or hardly grind metal, things that are stinging in your nose. And after, I would say, an hour, you don't smell anything anymore. You have accustomed to the general smell of the space station. Your sense of tasting is impeded. The sense of smelling is impeded by another effect, which is the rush of water from your legs, from your lower body into your upper body and your head. You will have a head like with a nose congestion, which means that also the little bulbs that do smelling and tasting are impeded. This is good for not smelling anymore your colleagues' sport socks, but it's in a way bad if you start to eat your normal food and do not taste it anymore. It comes down to microgravity. Microgravity does a lot to your body. Microgravity is the effect of a free fall condition, which means you don't have a up or down anymore. You have to orientate yourself in three-dimensional space, completely new. And this microgravity affects a lot of things, especially as you don't have to walk anymore, to stand upright, to keep your body against a tug of gravity. And this has effects on the muscles, on the bones, and all that changes your body in a matter of from a couple of hours to over a week or 2 weeks, where the effects of microgravity can be seen. But the good news is, despite the fact that we never experienced weightlessness or microgravity as humans, we have developed in a way that all of our vital functions are still guaranteed in space. You don't need artificial nutrition running through a tube into your body. You can eat. What you eat goes down to the stomach, it takes the way it takes on Earth, and it comes out the same way as on Earth. Unbelievable, but the whole digestion process is not depending on gravity. This is something you very much cherish when you come up there, that you can eat in almost the normal way. You don't need to support your lungs in breathing. They do it automatically, and it functions the same way as down here on Earth. You don't need to support your kidneys in getting rid of poisonous substances in your blood and in your body. And all that says that the human body obviously is developed in a way that also extends into space. And this is something we can only see when we go into space. If you stay on Earth, nothing would change, and we would not wonder that. There's a couple of things that we look into when we do medical experiments and research on the space station, and some of them have to do with food or food intake. Just let me point out a couple of them. Space motion sickness is something that goes the other way. It has to do with food, but you don't want to eat anymore if you feel nauseated, if you constantly feel like on a rocking boat and you have to fight the seasickness. This is almost the effect that you have in the beginning in space. So the first couple of days, probably your pleasure to eat food will be very much impeded. But if you see muscle atrophy, that is something food can do something against. If you want to build up muscle, you prefer a certain brand of food. If you're constantly losing muscle mass because they are underworked, then you would also use food in order to counteract that. The weight-bearing bones demineralize. They demineralize in a way that you're constantly losing calcium out of your bones. The bones normally react to jumping, for example. This is very healthy for bones. You don't jump, you don't walk in space, you float. It's the least load on the weight-bearing bones, and they lose mass instantly, and you have to counteract that by certain provisions also in the food. The cardiac deconditioning, well, this is something where you, let me Okay. This is now the video. We will go and accompany my colleague Alexander Gast on his mission that he did in 2014. And these missions start in Baikonur, in a Russian place at that time. Nowadays we have a couple of options to go into space, but this is the options that we used until the upcoming spaceships in the USA. And very much the same like me, he was launched in the Soyuz rocket. It's a short flight to the International Space Station, and you see him entering and greeting his friends in the International Space Station at that very moment. He is constantly busy with medical tasks, with material research, with all sorts of experimental tasks. First of all, controlling whether he feels well, or on the other hand, also checking what effects of the changes into microgravity into the space station can be seen. He was witnessing football tournaments, so a little bit of sports is allowed also in space. The most strenuous thing that you can do in space is step outside in a bulky spacesuit and deliver 6-7 hours of hard work outside. And Alexander was preparing such a space walk. Yesterday, by the way, the French ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet finished a very prominent spacewalk after 7 hours out in space, completely spent, but happy to have delivered his work. When a new vehicle arrives, you will see here, we are careful not to breathe in some particles that are floating around. And after 6 months, with what the Russians call a soft landing, you come back to Earth. So now that we have watched the video, including Alexander Gast's return to a rehabilitation site in Cologne, let us look at a couple of things that you probably have missed. Remember me talking about the rush of water from the lower body to the upper body. This is Alexander Gast on the ramp before the launch, and this is shortly after the launch. The face looks younger, almost babyish. The wrinkles have gone away. This is the fluid shift, the load of water into the face. I see a lot of smiling faces here. But those that hope that this is a rejuvenation chance, no, it's no chance. In the moment you are back on Earth, the water rushes down again, and you are back to where you started. We do all sorts of no, this is the wrong way. We do all sorts of measurements and medical examinations in order to find out what is the most pressing issue we have to address. For example, the skin aging or the body temperature. For this, we had to invent things that would measure your core temperature without having to swallow pills or doing other things in order to measure your core temperature. And we found out that the core temperature is 1 degree higher on a basis. 1 degree higher, if you translate that to what you need to eat and what you need in terms of an energy balance, is a huge difference. We need to completely set new standards of nutrition, of caloric values in order to match what we have in space, just because of this change in the body temperature. So the energy balance is completely different. We easily overfeed our astronauts if we prescribe something that is more than they need in their caloric state on board. And this is all possible only because now we stay 3 months, 4 months, up to 6 months on board of such space station. In a short flight, you wouldn't notice that. You see the different body posture. The more relaxed body posture in space, it diverts from what we have here on the ground, especially because we don't need to counteract the tug, the pull of gravity. Cardiovascular adaptation goes, so you don't have a running heart or you don't feel uncomfortable in space, but the heart also changes, and with it, it's caloric input. The worst thing that we have discovered that makes us the most worries is the eyes deform. The eyeball undergoes deformation, and with the time spent on board of the International Space Station, your sight deteriorates. So your acuteness of vision is something that you have to take care of. We don't know yet the effect, where the effect comes from, but we are researching on this first. This is the measurement of body mass. You don't measure weight anymore. You measure the body mass, which is an analog. In Earth, it's the same, but in space, you don't weigh anymore. And this is some measurement device for the body mass. And you see a slight weight loss, even despite exercise during the day. You have a hard time to build up muscle mass because of all these changes in your physical condition. This is a marvelous machine. It's called ARED. It's an advanced resistance exercise device. It's like in your sports studio. It's a pneumatic machine. And they, with the advent of this device, the astronauts are able to maintain their fitness. Much more so than in my case. When I was on board of the Mir station, we only had a treadmill, which is not enough to maintain your fitness. And you see Alex in different positions and exercising different muscles. And what a view, I mean. When you're exercising an hour, you come from America across Europe and go into Asia, and all with a beautiful view down there, which makes the training much more easier. So all of that, in addition to having a cramped environment, you have a 0.4 square meter cabin for yourself for 6 months. It's the most expensive real estate that you can have, but it's very small. And you have to take care of your own hygiene, of keeping your skin free of any microbes without a shower. No shower, no bath, just using wet towels, which are soaked with some antibiotic and antimicrobic substances in order to do that. And even when you shave, like Alex does here, you have to pay attention, because the little stubbles would go into the atmosphere, float around, come in the eyes of you or your colleagues, and that is the suction device here. Hoover kind of suction device to suck away all the little stubbles. Even that is changed under a microgravity condition. And I talked about the eye and lung irritation. This is especially true when you come into a new vehicle, like in a transport vehicle arriving from Earth. It has seen a lot of launch loads and vibrations, and there's all kinds of particles probably floating towards you. So you wear a breathing mask, yeah, also in space, and you wear goggles. So nutrition has to take into account for a lot of things that are different on board of the space station, and there's a social factor about nutrition, grouping together, exchanging some nice words over the food, or enjoying the food, but it's also something that is needed in order to keep you in a working fashion. You only return to Earth after prolonged micro-G, and then the whole process starts to reverse. You have to get acquainted again to walking. You have to get acquainted again to orientating yourself in an environment. And all that is something where all the factors that you had on board, the training, the preparation, but also the food works together. If you look through Wikipedia and ask for space food, there's a lot of choice nowadays. Only few astronauts, but a lot of choice on the market. Don't believe these kind of things where they have space food ice cream of astronauts. We would have liked to have ice creams, but our fridge was always full. So what kind of food do you choose? Well, on a scale from 1 to 10, if you ask astronauts, crisps, a package of crisps is the highest value food. Why? They have no time to prepare food. Time is the factor You have to break away from what you're doing. You have to start collecting the things for your lunch or for your dinner. You have to heat them up. The water heating is very slow on board of the space station. So you have to really count an hour or so in order to prepare food with some soup and some entree and some main dish for yourself. And so a package of crisps is much more convenient. But that, in the short terms or short flights of shuttle, led to a high degree of over-salting your body, putting too much salt in your body. And so we set out in my mission to look into what salt does to your body, to your bones, to your energy exchange. I did a medical nutritional ward, metabolic ward in space it was called, for 18 days. Everything was controlled. Everything I ate, everything I drank, everything I gave from me. I had daily blood draws done myself. I had when on the toilet, I had to take aliquots, and all this helped in order to find out that salt indeed is a dangerous ingredient. But salt is the only thing that comes through this barrier of tasting and smelling. So the more salt you do on it, you have at least a taste, a smell under these reduced things. So now we have come away from salt. We have replaced it by other spices that also go across this barrier, but do not add to the effects of salt, sodium, and in your body. In order to research this, my flight was taken as an initial point. Then we started to put people in a 6-degree head-down position in a special center that was built in Cologne in order to see what effects of spaceflight on the human body you can counteract. And finally, when these effects were repeated that we have seen in space, we also included some mice in order to see how salt, a high salt load, a low salt load would affect their bones and their well-being. So science is done with an initial start on the space station, and you bring that information down, you repeat it, or you try to repeat it on the ground, and then you arrive at a better recipe, or going away from salt, or doing recommendations, for example, for old age people, also to reduce their salt intake, because this additionally works on their bones that are already exposed to osteoporosis, like in this respect. So what we where we come from a bag of crisps as bachelor's food for short space flight. Now we have to take much more care of what we put into our food for long-term space flight, like Matthias Maurer's space flight will do. And you see these nicely prepared things that in a short while Mr. Hoffmann will introduce to you. They are even home-cooked, which means that you bring some smells and some tastes of home with you into such an artificial environment as the International Space Station. And then you invite your friends from Russia, from America, from Japan, from Canada, and you sit around the table and explain what is a rostiger Ritter or what is geheiratet. We will come to that, I'm pretty sure. So, if we now leave the Earth's orbit and go beyond, to Moon, to Mars, what do we need to take into account there in terms of food? You cannot probably bring everything that you like as a menu with you to the International Space Station, to the moon bases that we are going to build in 10 years or so from now. So if you look at it from the science side, you need to close loops. You need to close the water loop. You need to close the loop of atmospheric substances that you have, CO2, oxygen. You need to close the loop also in what you eat and what you give away in terms of processed food in order to reintroduce it into a circle, and in that respect, do not take a lot of mass with you in order to feed the astronauts and the future colonists on the moon. So we are looking for things that would nicely fit into such a recycling loop in terms of food. You can arrive at seafood, for example. You can arrive also at algae. Algae is a prominent means of recovering O2 from CO2. The oceans do that all the time on Earth. It is nutritious, as you know. Algae food has long since been introduced into the food chain. And it is able to close the loop, also processing wastewater. Nitrogen in the wastewater can be produced into new biomass. Additionally, we choose algae in Stuttgart as a research object because it has a high harvest index, a higher biomass productivity than tomatoes or salad or whatever you may want to grow in such a greenhouse. It uses light that we have ready available, delivers very nutritious proteins and fats if you can open the cell of the algae, and it can be up to 40% of a food supplement. So algae is one of the things that we introduce now into these closed loops in order to produce the space food of the future without having to bring it from Earth. But I can assure you, things that are cooked with such an affection and mastery on Earth still will be a dinner for Easter or birthdays or Christmas, also in the faraway colonies on Moon and Mars. You will never match that. To bring a cow to Mars is impossible in terms of the energy balance and the things you have to provide in order to keep such a livestock alive. A short view into the future. In the moment, all that we have on ISS is practically brought from Earth, with the exception of a couple of leaves of salad. And therefore, we are looking forward to what will be the home-cooked meal of Matthias Maurer. We will soon hear. Thank you.